question is, are you ready?
What do you guys want to talk about?
Let me talk to you. Yeah.
Throwdown Nation, we are live. It is a Thursday night. We are rolling on Instagram, on YouTube, on Twitter/X, on Facebook, and on Twitch. It is episode 131 of the Throwdown, and today we are throwing down with North Carolina-based pro wrestler and ECW original, the one and only C.W. Anderson. How you doing tonight, sir?
Good, Matt. Thank you for having me. Now that I'm finally here.
Absolutely, man. Just to kind of fill everybody in, we were kind of scrambling these last few minutes, having some technical difficulties, but we managed to improvise, adapt, and overcome. And here we are.
2 laptops later, here we are.
Absolutely, man. And, for those of you that are watching this live, if you have any questions or comments, just throw them in the chat and we'll either handle them as we go or do a little Q&A at the end.
Yep.
So we'll go ahead and get started with the first and the most obvious question, and that is, how long in total have you been involved in the wrestling business?
This year makes 31 years.
Nice. And I know the answer to this, but who trained you?
In the beginning, nobody. I started in 93. I kind of went with some friends to a local wrestling school, and we just kind of got in there. We had like a independent guy that was the trainer, but he was here and there. And I didn't really get formally trained until I went to the power plant and got up under Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker. But before that, it was just with the guys in the ring, learning on the road, learning as we go. That's kind of how we did it around here.
Gotcha. So it was sort of kind of backyard plus.
Almost. Yeah, they were running shows in armories and things like that. And the training school was in an old Pepsi plant, the one I started with. And it was just a bunch of local guys. And, in the very, very beginning, when I started when I was like 16, I only did that for like a year before my baseball coach made me quit. That was legit backyard. I mean, the ring was in a guy's backyard.
Gotcha. So, when it came time to actually start the, for lack of a better term, legitimate training at the power plant, I'm sure by that point, you would probably, again, for lack of a better term, probably develop some bad habits and such. So what would you say was the most difficult aspect of professional wrestling for you to wrap your mind and body around when you were first getting started doing it?
Psychology.
Okay.
The hardest thing. I used to watching the stuff on TV and then having guys that I was doing shows with, we were all about moves, kind of like some of the things you see nowadays where the moves, they're more into moves than they are telling a story. And
right.
It wasn't until I got with some of the guys, the more experienced guys, I started talking about psychology, and I would sit down with Ivan Koloff, Jimmy Valiant, guys like that, and ask them just what was their perception of psychology, and to teach me what they knew, anything to help.
Right.
And just little by little picking that things up. And I think that was the hardest. And I think even now, some days in matches and stuff, I still have I can say a hard time, but it's just when you're having to read the crowd, you're always learning with that. In psychology, it's always going to play a major role in professional wrestling.
Absolutely. And, you and I are pretty close to the same age. I'm going to be 56 in September. And, I've been a fan, varying levels of fandom at different points in my life, but I've been a fan since I was around 11. So I kind of grew up during the territory days, saw, the Monday Night Wars start to finish, saw the rise and fall of ECW, all of that. And it's been an interesting ride, sort of being around for a lot of this for the last 40 plus years. I mean, my earliest wrestling related memory was as a kid in Florida, watching the old Florida Championship Wrestling with Gordon Solie doing the commentary. And
Yeah.
The first feud I remember seeing was Dusty Rhodes and Kevin Sullivan. And, when you're 11 years old, Kevin Sullivan was a scary dude.
Yeah, it wasn't until you get to know him and you just realize how nice of a man he actually is.
What a sweetheart the guy actually was. But he had the whole satanic, Army of Darkness gimmick going on. And, when you're 11, man, that's some heavy stuff.
Yeah.
But so you were mentioning that during high school you were a baseball player, and I saw that actually coming out of high school you actually had an offer from the San Diego Padres.
Yeah.
But you ended up deciding to go on to college. Kind of tell us that story. How did all of that come about?
Being a 17, 18-year-old kid that really never my mom still is very protective and very mother henish, as I say sometimes. And she legitimately, I listened to her. We never went anywhere, never really did anything. The only time we would go somewhere is if it had baseball. It was baseball related, which was traveling. Mm-hmm. And she talked me out of it. She said that her words, and again, I'm ignorant at 17, 18 years old, the pros will always be there, go to college. Hindsight being 2020, I should have went to the pros because college has always been there. And easy, honey, that's not me. My Rottweiler jumped up thinking it was another dog. But it was, I look at it in two ways. It was a huge mistake. I should have went. I was a very gifted baseball player. As a catcher, 170, 75 pounds. I had a good bat, not great. I wasn't a power hitter. I was consistent, but my arm was my highlight. And I look at it of what kind of life I would have had as a baseball player. But then I also look back at there never would have been a C.W. Anderson.
Right.
Never would have had this life that I have here.
Right.
I think my body wouldn't have been as broke up as it is right now.
Yeah.
In a catcher. But
well, your knees would have been.
Yeah, my knees. I was a catcher from the time I was 8 till I got into wrestling, which was 23. I caught, consistently, and I always threw from my knees. I never would hardly ever get up to throw down to second base. And I could always, Tony Pena he'd always do a split because he was somebody I watched before I became idolized, before Benito Santiago was my idol. And I would watch Tony Pena because he was always do a split. And at that age, I could do a split and catch. So I would never have to get up to throw down to second base. But I look back now, and even trying to squat down, just doing exercises in our gym is killing me. Just squatting down there, my knees and ankles have paid the price. So between that and wrestling, my knees and ankles are shot. But I hate some of it that I didn't go play baseball because it was my first love, and I was so gifted at it. But I'm really happy and content with my life now with still being able to wrestle, still traveling. I really enjoy where I'm at right now with my life.
That's awesome. And, it's funny, we all have stuff we can look back on and play the old what if game. But I mean, I'm a firm believer that you bloom where you're planted and that you're where God wants you to be.
Exactly.
So, and you've really just got to cling to that. And, you look back on everything and you think this has actually been a really good life.
Yeah,
So,
I've had a good ride. I've met some amazing people, met some amazing fans, have some great friends, so many stories. I come from this little community here in North Carolina called Emit, which is basically just a crossroads. And I grew up on a dirt road where my family was the only white family. So all the guys I hung out with were black, and even my best friend since 4 years old, he was best man at my wedding. Yeah, he's a black guy. And I never thought coming from this little community with these few amount of people that I've been able to do the things I have and travel and been to the places that I've been to. So I've had a very blessed life, and I have a very good life now. I have an amazing wife, great job, and still able to wrestle and do what I love.
absolutely. So, I'm presuming that you've been at least a fan of this stuff the huge majority of your life. Is that pretty accurate?
Up until I was about, I'm trying to think, 13 or 14, maybe 13, I didn't like wrestling at all. My little brother actually got me into wrestling. He got me to watch one show on a Saturday because he was a huge, and still is a huge wrestling fan. Like Jimmy Valiant is his guy.
Oh, yeah.
One Saturday morning, he said, just sit down with me, watch this one show. It was an NWA because that's all we got. We only got like 3 channels on our TV. And it was a Saturday morning, and it happened to be the Rock and Roll Express when they came in and they wrestled Ivan Koloff and Crusher Khrushchev. And it was the match where Ivan got victory rolled by Ricky Morton and they won the belts. And I remember when that happened, and Kevin and I were jumping around. We were little kids. I was hooked right then with wrestling. And not too long ago, I was sitting in a locker room in Clayton down the road when it was a show. And one side of me is the Rock and Roll Express, and Barry Darso is sitting on the other side of me. 3 of the 4 guys that got me into professional wrestling, I'm actually sitting beside.
Wow, that had to be one of those surreal moments where you're just sitting there thinking, "This is my life."
The first name I worked was Ricky Morton. I just worked him a couple weekends ago. I'm working him next month down in Charlotte at a baseball stadium for Big Time Wrestling, and he's one of my closest friends, one of my dear friends. So it's surreal to be able to people that I grew up idolizing, I became close to and sharing the ring with.
Yeah. A while back, I had both members of a tag team from North Carolina. They go by Brutality Incorporated. Mark James and Alex Evans.
Yep.
And when they were on the show, they had just wrestled you and Dreamer, and said it was just an absolute dream come true to actually get to share a ring with you guys. That's
I think a lot of them too. They're 2 good dudes, man. They really are. I've known Mark for a long time. He and I go way back, and we've wrestled. I think the last time I had wrestled him before that, he was 3 times that size. I mean, he lost a crap ton of weight. He looks amazing. And that was the last time he and I wrestled when he was really overweight. And he even told me, I think he was saying he just wasn't happy because he was just that out of shape. But now he's in great shape.
Yeah. And I haven't seen them wrestle in person, but I've seen enough of their stuff on YouTube. Those guys are a solid team. I mean, definitely quite impressive. So I know the whole basic story of how the whole C.W. Anderson thing came around. You were apparently you sort of got informally adopted into the Anderson family. You were kind of from the way I've heard it, you were doing some training at what was Gene Anderson's school, and it all kind of
no. My very first show was December 4th from 1993, and they put me in a match. They put me under a hood.
El Chico.
Yeah, El Chico.
Yeah.
The whole Razor Ramon thing. And the two guys on there were wrestling. They were Andersons. They had gotten permission from Gene to use the name. And the older at the time, Rocky, was kind of calling it quits, and Pat was younger. He was in his 30s, and he was looking at tag team partner. Well, at the time, I only had a goatee. I looked more like Big Boss Man than I did an Anderson. And he saw something in me, wanted to know if I would become an Anderson, give me the whole spiel about not jobbing the name out, the respect, the whole things like that, and asked me that I want to tag with him. And I said, of course. I mean, I had no clue what I was going to do. He said, well, just come up, 3 letters. His name was Pat. You had Arn and Ole. He said, try to come up with a 3-letter name so we can keep it. 2 weeks, I can't try to come up with something. And all I could come up with was Ike and Cal. I won't never forget those 2 names. And my baseball coach that I grew up, he was my baseball coach forever. He was a manager at the time. His name's Randy Driver. And I was like, Mr. Randy, I can't come up with anything. I said, I don't know what to call myself. He said, just use your initials and call yourself CW. So that's just what I did.
There you go.
Yep.
There you go. Absolutely. But, I think it is exceptionally cool that you've really kept the Anderson thing going over the years to the point now that you're tagging with Brock. I mean, he was somebody that I felt the whole time. I felt like he was criminally underused in AEW.
Shocking, right?
Yeah. And I'm glad to see him, having the success in MLW and other places that I feel like the guy deserves.
100%. He is. I love that dude to death. He is, his mom and dad, amazing. I've gotten to know his dad, Arn, over the past couple of years since Brock and I've been tagging. Amazing. His mom, just as good. Brock is a sponge. All he's needing was the reps in the ring time.
Right.
And in the past year, it's like his agility, his mobility, his timing, everything about him has grown leaps and bounds. And now that we've been in MLW, first we started at AML, our company here in North Carolina. Shout out to Brian and Tracy, who's run a great promotion for 11, 12 years. They're the ones that run WrestleCade. You can't say good enough things about that. So they've given Brock and I a platform to tag there with great talent. We've been wrestling, George South, the Dawsons, Billy Brash, guys like that are the local AML guys we've wrestled. And now we're in MLW. Our feud lately has been with Alex Kane and Mr. Thomas, 2 other great wrestlers, and Matthew Justice, Paul Walter Hauser we've been feuding with, Paul London. The talent at MLW is so good. And since I'm one of the MLW originals from way back in the day and came back, and we got Brock, and he's just gotten so good. His promos have gotten good. His timing, just everything about him. It ain't going to be too much longer before he is just going to skyrocket, and you'll see him. He'll be that guy up top, because it's only a matter of time, because it's in his genes. 100%.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He is definitely an Anderson.
Yeah. Every time we get done with the match, we wrestled Kojima and Okamura not too long ago, and I got out of the ring, and on the way back, I just told him how proud of him I was, because that's the first time he's ever wrestled anybody Japanese and done that Japanese style match. And I know me, the first time I wrestled somebody Japanese, I was so nervous and almost terrified. And I know he was nervous, but he just knocked it out of the park. And on the way back, I told him, dude, I am so proud of you that he's coming along like this. And thank you, Clayton. I appreciate that, man, for the kind words you just said. But yeah, Brock's such an amazing guy. I love tagging with him.
Yeah, just throwing him up on the screen real quick. But so, away from wrestling, what are some of your other hobbies and interests? I see that you're something of a chess enthusiast. I found that interesting because I'm kind of a chess player myself.
Yeah,
So.
I collect chess sets. I also play, but I collect chess sets. I got almost 60 chess sets that I've collected over the years. I started collecting them the time where it was at ECW, and we had Anarchy Rules in Minneapolis or St. Paul, Minnesota, where I wrestled with my best friend Steve Carino for #1 contenders. And we were at the Mall of America, and I saw this store, and they had like 40 chess sets.
Mm-hmm.
It just hit me to start collecting. I don't know why, but I love playing chess. Got my nephews playing chess. My brother and I have played chess. My real job now that I'm land surveyor, I've been that for a long time. I work 4 days a week, love that job. I also started a drone company and flying drones for surveying. I just started that not too long ago. I team with a company called Rock Robotics out of Colorado. So that's one of the things I'm doing. Many people that have followed me know my dad passed away last year, and he left my brother and I the family farm, horse farm. So I still live on the farm and take care of our horses, as I call them, pasture ornaments, because all they do is just stand around and look. And this, I got to tell you, I've turned down a lot of interviews and not picking anything up since you and I have had this book for so long. But I've turned down a lot of interviews because this is my busy. Not only am I wrestling, but the farming. But I also have to do what's called bush hogging, which is we got 30 some acres I have to cut all the time. So I really don't have any time for anything. So that's.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to do
You're
this.
welcome. But this is busy, with my job, the drones, the farm, and just everything. My time has been very limited. I'm blessed, but it's something I enjoy. Out here on the farm, I get to, in some ways, still be with my dad because it's the farm I grew up on when we did tobacco and things like that. So we've been here since the 80s, and I get to see him, and be with him every day like that. But just work, and I love flying drones. I love playing chess. My wife and I work out every day. We have our own gym here. I have 2 Rottweilers that I love. They're my kids. I love taking care of them. So that's kind of my hobbies and passion. Anything Rottweilers, drones, chess, and I play video games too. So I fit that in there somewhere.
Gotcha. So outside of wrestling, what person inspires you the most and why?
I think my wife would be a gimme, 100%.
Smart man.
my wife planned our wedding back in September. I can't remember if I put that up on my YouTube or not, but it was an amazing wedding because fortunately, this was my 4th wedding. So it was one of these, just tell me where to stand, I'll stand. But she did an amazing job planning that. She's 20 something years younger than I am, but she's 20 something years more mature than I am. So she keeps me in check with that, with finances, the whole 9 yards, and also with my mom, her being able to carry on, trying to still be the rock of this family after losing her soulmate. My mom,
Right.
This would have been their 55th wedding anniversary. She's
Hmm.
been with him since she was 16. And then, we lose him out of the blue. So her still carrying on every day, those two have are my inspiration because, if they can get up, especially my mom can get up and make it through the day, then I have no excuse not to.
Gotcha. So, as far as as your involvement with ECW went, I have read that you basically attended an ECW tryout in Georgia, I believe, and caught Paul Heyman's attention. So, tell us about how your involvement with ECW came about.
It was a show in somewhere in Georgia. I was telling Brock this the other day because I thought it was Rome because his dad's from Rome, but it was, I forgot where, it might have been Columbus, But anyway, going way back to my beginning, two of my very first students, one of them was Lodi, Raven sign guy.
Yeah.
He was tagging with the guy, Curtis. His name was Curtis White. He wrestled as Toad here on the Independence of North Carolina. And he did something a little bit in the end of WCW because they called him Frog. He tagged with PG-13. Toad had a tryout down in Georgia. The night before, he and I were wrestling the Public Enemy in South Carolina. And he was going down his tryout. And he wanted me to go. He said, "You come with me." I didn't want to go. I'm a big introvert. So I don't like going where I don't know people, things like that. And he's like, "Look," he said, "you might not get in the ring, but you'll be able to see Steve." I knew Steve Carino he and I were friends from before. I knew Simon Diamond. He said, "You'll get, say hello to everybody, introduce yourself. Just, get your name out there. Do a little politicking." So he begrudgingly talked me into it. So we go to the show. He gets in the ring and he's actually working out with Angel from the Baldies. He got through with his tryout. Nova was running it. Nova looks at me. I'm standing on the outside talking to Steve. He looks at me and goes, "Chris, do you have your gear?" I said, "Well, it's in the car, but yeah, I got it." He said, "Run and go get it." So I ran, got my gear, got in the ring, got in there with Simon Diamond. He and I did a little 5-minute match. I got out. Nova was telling me about my timing. He said, "You have immaculate timing," or great timing. It was one of those words. I get out. I hear somebody sitting in the crowd or sitting in the bleachers, the seats, and they yell to Bill Alfonso, "Fonzie, get that bald guy back in the ring." So Fonzie looks at me and goes, "Daddy, he wants you back in the ring." And I'm like, "Who?" I look over there and it's Paul Heyman. He's sitting with Taz and the Dudleys. And they're watching the tryouts. So they get me back in there. And it felt like an hour and a half. It was probably 45 minutes that they were sending people in that I was working out with. By the time the doors get ready to open, we get done with everything. I go in the back and I'm cleaning up because, I'm bumping hard. I'm hitting the ropes hard. I'm actually spitting up blood. I still have the vision of Paul Heyman walking in that bathroom with his coat and hat. He walks right up to me, sticks his hand out and says, "Hey, I'm Paul Heyman. It's nice to meet you." I said, "Hey, Paul." I said, "I'm Chris Wright. It's an honor to meet you, sir." He says, "Chris, where you wrestle at?" I said, "Well, I'm at the power plant now. I went through that tryout." I said, "That's where I'm at now." He says, "Do they have you under contract there?" I said, "No, sir." Because not long before that, they told me, J.J. Dillon and Paul Orndorff told me I didn't really have what it takes to make it at WCW in a tryout. Even though I was there, they told me that.
Wow.
He says, "Okay, good." He goes, "What's your wrestling name?" I said, "C.W. Anderson." And in classic Paul Heyman voice, he goes, "I knew it." He says, "You look like an Anderson. You have the left punch like Arn. You have the spine buster like an Anderson. Don't leave before I talk to you at the end of the night." I said, "Yes, sir." He told me I was welcome to hang out in the back. Getting close to showtime, Jim Molyneux comes up to me and says, "CW, yes, sir. Paul wants to see you in the back." So I go back in the locker rooms. Paul is sitting there with Vito LaGrassa, Danny, and Roadkill. He introduces to me, says, "You're tagging with Vito. You guys are third match. Welcome to ECW." And that's how I got the job.
What a cool story. I mean,
recently, there's a guy on YouTube named Lou Gregory. He has a lot of ECW house shows and stuff. And that match is there. It's June 6th of 1999. I will have
to look that up.
You'll see a very different looking CW because I'm in a cutoff T-shirt and jean shorts. That was the gimmick I was trying to do at the time. Yeah, I was getting away from not getting it because I was at the power plant. I was trying to get away from an Anderson thing because I didn't have permission from Arn. I just had permission from Gene. I hadn't spoken to Arn yet.
Right.
So, but yeah, it was a very different CW.
Nice. So, do you have, just out of curiosity, do you have any type of ongoing relationship with Paul? Do you ever hear from him these days, or not really?
The last kind of contact I had with him 10 years ago, maybe, possibly, when he watched one of my interviews where I said that he was out there filming the movie Rollerball instead of trying to get us a USA contract or USA TV deal.
Yeah.
He lost his shit about that. And I've been saying it for years. And it ain't like I made it up. It had come, so now let me have to throw out the word allegedly now.
Yeah.
So allegedly he was doing this, but other guys higher than me from New Jack up were saying it, because New Jack said it in an interview with me sitting there and Mike Johnson without me saying a word. And Mike Johnson looks at me, and it's on video. It's from the Legends of the Extreme on it might be on Title Match or it's on High Spots. And he goes, "That's kind of funny, ain't it, CW?" And New Jack had no clue about the Twitter war Paul and I got into. And of course, every one of Paul's fans blasted me because of it. And yeah, it was, which I don't care,
Yeah.
But that didn't bother me. But yeah, that was kind of the last time he and I had any kind of interaction. But before that, when I saw him at one of the WWE shows when I was at ECW, everything was great. And I have nothing against Paul, not one.
Yeah.
Well, it's been 20 something years, whatever.
Right.
The only thing I've ever said is I wish he just would have told us that we were going out of business. This is your company. Be man enough to tell us that we were going out of business. That's what you're a boss. Be man enough to tell me that. Don't let me find out that we've gone out of business by watching you on TV at commentary.
Got you. So I know that you were a part of it for at least a time. What are your perspectives on WWE's attempted revival of ECW?
It sucked.
Yeah.
It was a Disney. I always called it a Disney version. I don't even think it was even that. I don't think I'm giving it too much credit. Disney. I love Disney way better than that. I was under the impression when I signed, because Dreamer called me and said that he and Paul were in control. Said they were all in control. Dreamer and I were going to pick our feud back up. I asked him, "Do I have to go to High Valley?" He said, "No." He said, "You're going to be one of my top heels. We're going to pick our feud back up, blah, blah, blah." Okay, I'll sign. I signed the bare minimum. A lot of us did, just to be there. And then after the very first show at the ECW arena where I worked Sabu, Vince took it over, put his guys in there, and it was never.
Yeah, and
Francine and I have gone on record and even done an interview where when we found out we were not going to be on TV or doing anything that night, we were gone. We'd scoot out the building and go somewhere else. It sucked. That being there, that place at the time, I don't know about it now, so I can't speak on it now. But at the time when Vince was running it and we were there, it would suck the life out of you and the fun of wrestling, because ECW, we were a family. It was fun.
Right.
I would always tell my mom when I'd leave to go to a show at ECW, I'd always go see her at work before I fly out. And I said, "All right, Mom, it's time to go to work." She's like, "You're not going to work. You're going to see your second family," because she knew how much I loved being there.
Right.
That wasn't.
Yeah. Right. I had a feeling, that I could pretty much predict what your perspective on the ECW revival was going to be, and I'm not surprised, because it really should just never have happened.
No.
I mean, if it was going to be done the way it was done, it should just have been just left alone.
What they should have done was let Paul and Tommy run it and keep us in smaller buildings. Don't have us filming it after SmackDown. Keep us in smaller buildings, because that was ECW. We weren't Madison Square Gardens. We were the ECW arena, the civic centers and places like that. We were smaller places. If you could have done that, it could have worked. But no, Vince, he couldn't leave well enough alone, because he's going to bury anything that he doesn't create.
Exactly. So tell us, this may be kind of a difficult question because you've been doing this as long as you have, but if you can narrow it down to one or two, tell us about one or two of your favorite matches that you've been a part of.
Easily one of my top two possibly is my I Quit match with Dreamer at Hammerstein, the very last one. There were so many significant things about that one, because it was January 7th, 2001, which was my 30th birthday. Dreamer told me that if we had a good match, he was going to shake my hand. That was a driving force. Before that, I had a few of the guys tell me that I Quit matches were very hard to do. They didn't know if we could pull it off, but they wanted us to pull it off, but they didn't. I Quit matches are hard to do.
Right.
I had all these driving forces to make a great match. Not having barbed wire, we had to change the finish. A couple of different factors. Tommy and I didn't even start putting the match together till the pay-per-view started because we were trying to find barbed wire for the finish. Because when you see the table wrapped around or pulled across my nose, that was supposed to be barbed wire. That one. Because at the end of the match, Dreamer shakes my hands. They cut the camera. And I'm standing there in the ring by myself, and there's 3,000 people on their feet at the Hammerstein Ballroom chanting CF and Dub. They're chanting my name. Very emotional. I'm trying, I'm bad guy heel, and I'm trying to hold it in. You actually see me walking back, looking around at people because it's all in here. I come through the curtain. Balls Mahoney is the first one to greet me, and he's the biggest clap. And Balls is always over the top with his emotion. You got to love Balls Mahoney. And he said, that's one of the best effing matches I've ever seen. He hugged me, kissed me on the cheek. I was getting high fives from everybody. And, and then a week later was our last one, last thing. And I think probably my second, I have so many great matches tagging with Steve Corino and Simon Diamond in Japan. But one of my favorites was a singles against Masato Tanaka. It was a house show, 4,000 people there. And I split my finger open, my hand open real bad. Tanaka knocked me out because we were off on our timing. And I had Carino and Loki and Spanky A as my seconds that night. So that was a good one of my favorites. But those had to be my top two.
Gotcha. Everything you ever did with Dreamer was just magic. I mean, you guys really had a very special chemistry.
Yeah, we did. We do.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, let's see here. Okay. This is really a perspective question. But, from the perspective of somebody having been doing this as long as you have, if you could only be one, would you rather be great in the ring or great on the mic?
In the ring. I always say that's one of the reasons Steve Corino and I were such a great tag team, because he always called me a general, and he always said that I did all the ring work. I was the workhorse, and he was the mic, because he's second to none when it comes to talking on the mic, and I'm not. I guess being an Anderson and growing up working, I've always the work part of it is what I love doing. So I guess the workhorse, yeah.
Gotcha. So, in terms of your, when you were sort of getting your feet under you as a wrestler and such, who, I mean, some of the influences are obvious, but who all would you say were influences in shaping C.W. Anderson into who he became?
Bobby Eaton. Mm-hmm. He was my number one. He's my GOAT. He and Arn, there's my Mount Rushmore, and he and Arn are my Mount Rushmore. I wanted to be Bobby Eaton when I got into business, because I wanted to be that guy that could work Ric Flair or a broomstick and have a 5-star match. That was Bobby, and not hurt you. That was Bobby. And it wasn't up until a year or so before he passed away that he found out that I idolized him. As long as I knew him after that, and the little thing we did at ECW, when Paul brought Bobby in to do the stuff with me, the day I met him, I was already nervous, but I walked to the back. We're at the ECW arena, and the gorilla position was 2 black curtains, about 10 feet apart. I come through the first one, and then there's a room off to the right where the guys like Taz and the Dudleys and those guys dressed, because it was air conditioned. And then there was the big open spot where the rest of us dressed. Yeah. So Paul happened to be sitting in that open area with Bobby Eaton. And when I come through the first curtain, I didn't make it through the second curtain because I see Bobby and Paul sitting there, and I had to go in the other room to collect myself because I started hyperventilating. Yeah. I knew I was getting ready to meet my idol. And I worked that night with him, and then got to know him, and I actually got to wrestle him not long after that. The ECW folded, but he was my guy. And then I have 100 videos of Arn that I watch, from he and Ole to him and Zbyszko and him and Bobby, stuff like that I try to take his best points from and make myself. Even today, I still do it. So Bobby and Arn were my two.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like I remember seeing a lot of him as a kid, and I feel like a lot of people have forgotten Larry Zbyszko and what a talent and a just crisp worker he was.
There was a lot of guys like that in old NWA and the early WCWs that people forgot about. They were just such solid workers. I always said that there's a few at WWF, but NWA had the best wrestlers.
Oh, for sure. No doubt.
At the time, it was so comic. At WWF, there was a lot of entertainers and things like that were very over the top and out there. And, then you had your Bret Harts and your Shawn Michaels and guys like that. But NWA, bar none, had the best wrestlers.
I could not argue that for a second. Growing up primarily in Georgia, I was, pretty much an NWA, / WCW kid. I didn't even really start watching WWF until I was in college, but yeah, I mean, but especially back then, like you said, it was NWA, you had wrestlers, WWF, you had entertainers, and it was two totally different animals.
Around here, we did get world class, got to know the Von Erichs and those guys, and world class had a little bit of both. They had a lot of great wrestlers. They had a little bit of the entertainers. They had a lot of great wrestlers as well. And then, Flair would go down and defend the title against Kerry Von Erich. And that's, Chris Adams is the reason I do the super kick. I watched him do it there, and I just became a fan of that. But I didn't get Georgia Championship Wrestling. I didn't see that. I didn't see Florida. None of that. It was just world class and NWA. And then, one of my closest friends now is Jack Victory, and going back and watching him back at world class, just seeing that stuff, which I love.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And when probably my mid-teens, we started getting world class in Georgia, and I remember seeing like Iceman King Parsons and all of those folks. I believe world class was where I first saw Kamala as well. Yep. So yeah. But yeah, it's man, good times.
Yeah, it's one of those, you don't know the good times until they're gone. And then you wish you could go back to some of them, especially how you felt as a kid watching wrestling and seeing that stuff come to life. Seeing them at the stadium shows, the Great American Bash, when Flair come in on the helicopter and things like that. You're like, God, just to be a part of that.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. So what have been some of your most unusual encounters with fans?
Other than at ECW, we'd have to fight them every now and then because we'd fight in the crowds and they were drinking.
Right.
I think my most unusual, there's two, and they both happened in Japan. One of them was, because the Yakuza sponsor some of the shows, and they would always come and sit in certain areas. And at the end of the night, they would take their favorite wrestler out. Well, Carino and I we were comedy and heels. People loved watching us because we were comedy and they knew we could wrestle. So one of the nights that they would always tell us, don't mess with them. They're sitting at this side, don't mess with them. Well, you might as well give me and Steve a bullseye because that's who we're going to. And we were messing with the Yakuza one night, and they were all, they're all dressed to a T. And Nakamura looks at us at the end of the night and says, tonight, sponsor dinner. What? The sponsor wanted to take us. It was the Yakuza. So they had one of their enforcer guys, a just big Japanese guy, wait for us, and he put us in a cab. He sat in the front, Steve and I sat in the back. We're going down through Tokyo. We take a side road. We go outside of Tokyo in the country, and we're still in the country. And I look at Steve, and I go, "Oh shit, they're gonna kill us. Taking us somewhere to kill us." Because we were screwing with them, and I was saying enough that I was making, because Steve, he always blew me off when it comes down about it. He was like starting to get worried too. And after a few minutes in the country, I had the vision of it. It just the woods just kind of opened up, and there was this steakhouse, like a Texas Roadhouse type restaurant, sitting there
Just in the middle of nowhere.
in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
They get us out. The guy kind of forces us in. We walk in the door, and they're all sitting there waiting for us, and they just pop me. "Oh my God, Karina's son, and they just lose it when Steve and I walk in and sat down with them and had the absolute best time with dinner. But for about 5 good minutes, I'm sure we were getting smoked.
Yeah. Wow.
We had one of the fans take us to an S&M club one night in Tokyo. Yeah, something to do.
I bet that was a treat. So do you have an all-time favorite match as a fan? A match that's like comfort food. You just find yourself kind of gravitating back to it. Do you have anything like that?
This is the time I need my buddy Preston here, the guy that I used to tag with, Preston Quinn. That was part of our Extreme Horsemen. Actually, that's him, like right there. You got
yeah,
my wife, Arn, and me. But he is such a geek when it comes to these things because he knows every match. I just wanted to put him over. I called him one day and told him I was watching this certain match. And he said, "You mean the guy, there was a guy in the crowd with a yellow shirt, black guy that had a kid and play high top fade?" I'm like, "Did you just watch this match?" He said, "No, I remember watching it when I was a kid." Like, he's that type of guy.
Wow.
But it was somewhere, it was the Midnight Express against the Southern Boys. It might have been a Clash of Champions or Bash. I don't know. But it was that match. I think the finish was Stan kicks Scott Armstrong in the back of the head and they roll him up 1, 2, 3. But it's that match is one of my ones that I watch all the time. I just go back and watch it. And also 1986 Starrcade, Ole and Arn against the Rock and Roll in the Cage.
Mm-hmm.
Those two.
Gotcha. Well, when you talk to Preston Quinn, tell him I want him on the show.
Okay.
I would love to pick his brain.
Yeah, he is a lot. He's a lot because he knows all that stuff. And also he's got, to shout out to him. He's got a great promotion up in Virginia called Mid-Atlantic Territory Wrestling. The colors are derived from the old WCW stuff. And, he allows nothing else to top rope, no dives, nothing. I mean, I worked for him, and up until MLW was calling, I was working for him a lot. And, he's got some great guys there. He's running it. And they got a little TV show on YouTube they're doing right now. But yeah, he's I like it because with you got AML in the Carolinas and you got him up in Virginia, and you can go to any one of these two places and see great professional wrestling. Yeah, and that's the word,
Gotcha.
Professional wrestling.
Absolutely. So, in your opinion, who are the best male and female wrestlers in the world right now?
The little. I have to preface this, but I don't watch a lot of it.
Okay.
It is a WWE. You got your go-tos like Charlotte, Rhea Ripley. I'm a big fan of Asuka's because she's from Japan, and I have a soft spot in my heart for Japanese wrestlers since I spent so much time over there. The male wrestlers, you got like Cody, Punk, Seth. That whole thing they have those three. I mean, you put them in there with anybody, they're gonna have a great match. Any of those ones on any six. The WrestleMania, this last WrestleMania that opened it with Rhea, the opening match, the three-way women's match, is one of the best matches I've seen in a long time. My wife's been in the business since the day she was born, literally since the day she was born, and we were both just in awe watching that match. But I love Seth's the entertainment value. He's also a hell of a worker. I've known Punk for a long time. He's all around great. You got Braun Breaker that's a comeuppance right now.
Yeah.
You got one of the young OG Javon Evans. I got to give him a shout out because I've known him for a long time here in the Carolinas.
Yeah.
But again, Cody, those guys, you just can't go wrong with any of those.
Gotcha. So, and I know that as long as you've been doing this, I'm sure this entirely applies, but I'll ask, what hurts right now? Or should I say what doesn't hurt, maybe?
I think the only thing that doesn't hurt is my ego right now. Knees hurt, ankles hurt, because I got to have my ankle replaced one day. I was told that about a year and a half ago, so I do everything I can to keep that. Back, all the concussions, neck, elbow. My elbows are shot. There's really not a lot that doesn't hurt. I live with a pain 5-6 pain scale, about 5 or 6 a day. And I walk for a living with surveying, so that makes it great when I'm having to walk all the day.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't trade it for the world. I've entertained a lot of people. I've met, again, I say this, I've met a lot of great people, and it's all been worth it.
Gotcha.
Because people come up and tell me all the time, what they used to watch me when they were growing up, and they love my work, things like that. It makes it worth it because I give some kind of entertainment value to those people. It's like I tell people in seminars when I'm teaching seminars that our job is to make real life not suck while they're watching us. Yep. Life sucks bad enough as it is. Let's give them 2.5, 3 hours where they can just let go and just be fans and forget about the real world problems. Because I wanted everybody to say, when you left an ECW, a Pro Wrestling 01, MLW, anything like that, that you can say C.W. Anderson did not disappoint. He give us our money's worth to some extent.
Absolutely. So what is your take on the role that social media is playing as a promotional tool in wrestling, specifically indie wrestling?
It gets people, I always say, or a lot of us say, the older guys, we're so glad that it wasn't around when we were coming up, because we couldn't have gotten away with half the stuff we got away with.
Yeah.
There's a lot more videos, but there's way more opportunities for guys because they can get more exposure with social media. I say this all the time. If it's out of sight, out of mind. If you're not out there promoting yourself, doing something, nobody cares, because nobody's coming to the door to knock on the door and tell you to come and do something. But the social media platform is giving any and everybody a chance to be the next big thing.
Gotcha. So, knowing everything you know at this point in your life, if you could give any advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Don't do the dumb crap I used to do in the beginning. I'm 260 pounds at the time doing leg drops off the top rope because I'm such a mark for Bobby Eaton. So my ass literally pays a price right now because of it. I should have got a valued trainer to teach me instead of learning on the fly, to learn how to work, to become a worker, not a wrestler. And it wasn't until I got to WCW that Dallas Page told me one of the things I use today, that if you think you're going slow down more.
Yeah.
Because these guys go too damn fast and they don't let it marinate.
Absolutely. I was actually talking to a guest on here the other day, about that topic. And there is a saying in the special operations community in the military: slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And that applies in so many aspects of just life in general, but wrestling in particular, can take a lot of wisdom from those words.
If you're
Slow
going,
it down.
if you're going 100 miles, let me interrupt you. But if you're going 100 miles an hour, you have nowhere to go but up. That's why it looks like I'm going fast in the ring sometimes, because a lot of my work is so slow and methodical as an Anderson that when I do speed up, it's just a little bit. It looks like I'm fast, but it's the ups and downs and gives people a chance to sit down and take it all in. One thing I learned that I tell people my story: the goldfish have a 9-second attention span, and we as humans have an 8-second attention span. So you got to slow it down for us.
Absolutely. So, do you have any pre-show traditions? Any things that you try to do consistently before you walk through the curtain? And that's probably evolved over the years. But like at this point, do you have things that you try to do consistently?
Being a baseball player, we're so superstitious that I do the same thing with, I lace my boots up the same way, even to the eyelets. I lace them the same way. I get dressed in a specific order. But as far as the getting ready, I call it my transformation from Chris to CW, which is I'll either have bottled water or a spray bottle and spray it all over me to get wet. That helps me get in that CW mode. I'll do a certain amount of push-ups. I'll do squats, pacing around. But I think the water thing is my ritual to get myself into that CW mode. And right before it's our time, my wife and I pray. It's a quick prayer, keeping us safe. Telling my dad, I know he's watching over me. I know he's got us to that extent. Right before we hit the curtain.
Yep.
Yeah. And I'm always nervous. Where he doesn't see, I'm always nervous. Before I walk through that curtain, I am shaking like this, nervous, because I don't want to let the fans down, my wife down, my tag team partner Brock down, myself down, and anybody else that paid money to come and see me, just because I want to give them CW Anderson.
Absolutely. So, something that we've done in all of these that's just been kind of fun is we've let the current guest pose a question for the next guest. And my guest last night is a guy from Connecticut who he's a referee, and he is also the head of talent relations for a small indie company up in Bristol, Connecticut. But I told him that you were the next guest. So the question that he posed for you is, if there is one singular bump in your career that you could take back, what would it be? Is there a bump in particular that you wish you had never done?
Now, I'm going to go with this. There's one bump, but there's bumps I've done multiple times that I wish I could take back. The one bump one night when I did my very first perfect leg drop off the top rope is where my back, I thought I broke my back because I landed perfectly. I didn't land on the side. I landed both ass cheeks flat, and it knocked the wind out of me. That bump I wish I could take back, because it actually was the beginning of my screwing my back up. One that I wish I could take back from doing over and over again is probably I used to take a Frankensteiner off the top rope outside through a table. I used to do that a lot. And that would hurt like hell. But I did it because I knew the reaction it was going to get.
Gotcha. So since this is part of a series, do you have a question that you would like to pose to the next guest? And I can, in a little bit, we'll be talking about, who the next few guests are. But I mean, the question doesn't have to be particular to anybody. But is there a question you would like to pose?
Here's one for me.
Okay.
One wrestler. You have to pick one wrestler back in time that's no longer with us, and ask them one question to get you motivated.
Oh, wow. That's actually a really good question. How would you answer that?
I would. God, it's kind of taboo to say because he's one of the guys I've wanted to wrestle. But I would love to know what motivated Chris Benoit in the ring. What got him? What was the one thing? Him and Eddie Guerrero. Eddie was one of the ones I've always wanted to wrestle.
Yeah.
But that's the one. What gets you motivated to go out there and do what you do?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll say this much. Chris Benoit is not a taboo topic on this show. I can separate the man's resume of work from how things ended up with him. I will maintain till my dying day that he is one of the best to ever do it. It's just a complete tragedy how things unfolded ultimately, but that does not diminish the work the man did. He was an amazing wrestler.
You can't take away from that from him either. Yeah, I've seen some. I watch his stuff all the time because that his style, Guerrero style, guys like that could actually workers. That's the ones I like. The matches between Benoit and Angle. I could watch those all day.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we're pretty much toward the end of things now. So do you have any upcoming shows or anything at all that you'd like to give some hype to?
Next Thursday, Brock and I will be in New York City for MLW.
Okay.
And then let's see, that Sunday, Brock and I are in Winston-Salem from AML. We're wrestling George South and my nephew, Colby Carino. Anything anybody wants to do, they can follow me on social media at ECW Anderson.
I think I've got most of your socials on the ticker here on the bottom of the screen.
July, we have a big one where we're wrestling the Ricky Morton and his son Kerry for big time wrestling down in Charlotte. I'm looking forward to that one. But yeah, next week's MLW, it'll stream it on YouTube. That's the first one. Nice.
Well, as far as what we've got coming up here on the Throwdown, this coming Monday, we've got a wrestler from South Carolina, Glitch in the Matrix Kilgore. Like I said, Monday at 7 p.m., it's episode 132. And then the following day, I've got episode 133 with an Atlanta-based wrestler, Alexandra Quinn, the Crash Out Cutie. And those are the next two coming up. But I definitely want to thank you for your time. This has been has really been an honor to have you on the show and just have the chance to hear some of your stories and pick your brain. Thank you for taking the time.
I'm glad we could do it.
Absolutely. And for those of you that have been watching this live, thank you. For those of you that'll be seeing this on replays, thank you for that. If you like what we've got going here, I've got all of my socials on my link tree on Instagram. So do me a favor and pop over and do the like, comment, share, and subscribe. And until Monday, be good to each other, love each other, and let's keep throwing